Bonjour tout le monde. What a perfect place to host a talk about wonder. Wonder is one of my very favorite topics. As Charlie mentioned, I run a company called Curiosity Inc. and an online project called Curiosity Global, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. But I really deeply believe in wonder and the power that it has to spark your curiosity, fuel your creativity, and in my case, and I think the case of many others, literally change your life. So when I spoke to Charlie about this talk a couple of weeks ago, he asked me to be really vulnerable. He's like, don't talk about the business, don't talk about what you do, tell a story. And that made me very, very happy because talking about work, even though I do love it, I spend a lot of time doing that. So I'm here to tell you what I believe wonder is all about and to share the story in bite-sized form of the last 5 years and how wonder changed my business, changed my life, and brought me to Montreal, and actually was the spark that created an online project called My Curious Eyes that I am so proud of. It's definitely one of the best things I've ever done, and it's creating change around the world, which makes me very happy and also very proud. So I just noticed that there's a couple of kids here. I'm going to do my very best, children and parents of children, not to swear. If it happens, I'm sorry. I'll do it in English, so maybe they won't understand. It happens sometimes. I can't help it. Anyway, I believe a lot in wonder, and for me, wonder is actually about 3 things. I think, in my experience as well, it's a feeling, so that feeling of surprise, delight, awe, fascination. I think it's often a question. So I wonder if, I wonder how, I wonder when, I wonder what. I spend a lot of time in those kinds of questions in my personal and professional life. And I also think it's a practice, one that we can actually cultivate with intention. And it does bring, in my experience, really wonderful things to your work and your life. So I want to start back in Toronto, take you back to January of 2012, and I was sitting at a table in my office space in the west end of Toronto in Liberty Village, for anyone who knows Toronto, in a brick and beam space, and a consultant friend of mine was standing at the whiteboards that were in my office, floor-to-ceiling whiteboards, and he was sketching on the whiteboard with a blue dry erase marker. I still remember the color. And he was saying things like, congratulations, what an amazing year. What do you think? Next year, this year, 1 million, 1.5 million maybe in the next 3 years? And I sat there listening to him, reflecting on the past year, 2011, which had been the best year of Curiosity Inc.'s early life. We were about 6 years into the business at that point, and we had booked almost $1 million in revenue, which I didn't even think was possible, but it had happened. And I had hired this guy, Peter, to help me in the fall of 2011 to create a brand and a business strategy for the business that would help me take myself out of the daily operations of the business a little bit more. So I sat there, and he's sketching things out, saying things like, I think we might need to hire a couple of more people so that you can step away from the daily operations of the business, focus more on vision, client relationship development. What do you think? And he turned around, and I was on the table like this, and a single tear rolled down my cheek. And he said, holy sugar cubes, what's happening right now in the way a middle-aged white guy can only respond to emotion? Not all of you, of course, but he was very uncomfortable with the tear situation. And I proceeded to tell him that I didn't want to be a managing director of this growing $1 million plus boutique insight and innovation company. I didn't want to manage a staff. I didn't want to have a senior operations person director. I didn't want that job. I hated the thought of that job. And in fact, I kind of hated my current job and this beautiful little business that I had brought into being from scratch. I couldn't have named it at the time, but I was definitely in the throes of burnout, big time. Exhausted, but not sleeping. really uninspired by the work, even though it was work that I set out to create for myself and for the clients I worked with. I came from advertising. And in 2005, when I started Curiosity Inc., I was really frustrated by colleagues that didn't ask a lot of questions or experience the world from outside their laptops, clients who were really comfortable with the status quo and asked me a lot of questions about best practices, when I really wanted to push them and myself to live and work with a lot more curiosity. So I started Curiosity Inc. with that in mind. I wanted to put curiosity back at the center of consumer insight work, strategy, communications work, which was the focus of my work at the time. So fast forward to 2012, and I had created this thing I set out to create, and I hated it. So 2 months after that tearful confession, I blew it up. I probably could have sold it. I definitely could have hired a couple of senior people to take the work away from me that I didn't want to do anymore. But both of those options sounded very challenging and difficult. So instead, in a freedom-seeking, freedom-inspired moment of creative destruction, I blew the business up. I let go of all my staff with so much love and severance. I definitely could have bought a small village in Portugal, but that was freedom tax. I sublet the office, and I sold all the furniture that I had lovingly chosen and assembled only 2 weeks prior. And I did continue to do insight and innovation work for the next couple of years, but on a much smaller scale, and usually projects I could do on my own or with one other freelance person working alongside me. But then in 2014, 2 years after that creative destruction moment, and I remember it was April of 2014, I did my last research and innovation project. I retired myself as a research and innovation consultant. I knew I was done because I couldn't muster a single truck about any of the work that I was doing. I didn't care anymore, so I knew it was time to move on to something else. And I also knew, after spending almost 20 years in Toronto, that I actually had to leave the city. I felt like I needed to unhook from the professional identity that I had so carefully crafted over 20 years. I really needed time and space away from the hustle of the city, the hustle of Toronto, the hustle and grind of Toronto. And I needed to do that, all of that, in a place where I had way less overhead, like a lot less. It was expensive to live in Toronto now. It's even more expensive to live there now. So I did what any normal, sane, wonder-inspired person would do. I packed up my apartment, put everything in storage, and decided to go house sitting. And I should mention that the stories that I'm about to share were self-funded. I don't have like a generous benefactor putting money in my bank account every month, if only that were true. I come from a very middle-class background, so I would encourage you and invite you to hear what I'm about to share with you through that lens. I made choices that were about freedom and wonder and wandering and curiosity and staying with the question, what's next, until I could actually answer it. And I took a very circuitous, wonder-filled route. So I went house sitting, and I did it for almost a year, and my first house sit was for my parents, bless their hearts. They went to Ireland for a month, and I watched their house and their plants in Peterborough, which is a small city northeast of Toronto. And then I got a great gig in Prince Edward County, and it was in the country. It's important that you know that. And it was in the country, and it had a 30-meter long driveway. And the 2 months I was there looking after their 2 kitty cats, they got record-level snow, which means I had to dig myself out every single time I wanted to go to town for food, and equally importantly, human contact. I have never shoveled so much in my entire life. I am still traumatized by that. So living in Montreal now, sometimes I get terrible flashbacks. So I was there for 2 months, wonderful, sleepy, quiet, country living in massive snowbanks. It was wonderful. After that, I was invited down to the Berkshires in Massachusetts, again in the woods, rural setting, in this beautiful cottage-style house looking after a cat named Seamus. And does everyone know where the Berkshires are? It was like near a small town called Williamstown, very close to Montreal, actually, very comfortable drive. And that was March and April. So again, it was pretty early spring, and the highlight of that experience, there were many, but the highlight was in the first week, I was sleeping in the downstairs bedroom that had this beautiful set of sliding doors that opened out onto their back lawn. And I woke up in the morning, early in the morning, probably about 6:30 or 7, to a young moose 5 meters away from the doors. I had a terrible cold at the time, so I was taking cold and flu medication. When I woke up, I definitely thought I was hallucinating. I'm like, there can't possibly be a moose that close to me outside while I'm still inside. But there was, and of course, ever the researcher capture of all things interesting, I reached over for my phone on my bedside table, and as soon as I picked it up to take a picture, he ran away. So I don't even have proof that it happened. So it might have been a hallucination, it's hard to say. So I spent those 4 months in very still, quiet, sleepy, snowy, moosey, rural environments. And then I got an opportunity to come to Montreal and house sit. For 1 month in May 2014, in the plateau around the corner from Parc Laurier, looking after a little cat, very cheeky little cat named Boots. And I have to confess that even though I grew up in small towns my whole life, I moved to Toronto right after university. And although I spent a lot of time here when I was working as a researcher, I would work alongside a French researcher when we were doing national studies for big bread companies, large automobile companies, big companies. So I spent a lot of time in Quebec, especially in Montreal, in the center and in the suburbs. But I didn't get it as a city. I just didn't understand Montreal. And whenever I heard people in research say, oh, la joie de vivre à Montréal, blah, 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 I'd be like, quoi? Or they would say, oh, le je ne sais quoi, la joie de vivre. And I would I'm not even kidding, and please don't boo me off the stage for admitting this. I would literally say, or have a speech bubble over my head that said, please, you're not even a real city. I know, I was a total Toronto a-hole. So I didn't get Montreal as a city until house sitting, wandering, brought me to Montreal in May of 2015. And even in the first week, I could feel the city like crawling into my heart. And you know what the biggest aha for me was, or the thing that created the most magic for me? It's the way this city parks. Not parks on the street, but hangs out in parks. The way that on a summer day, or actually it was a late spring day like today, warm, breezy, the way that you've got grannies sitting in the parks knitting, you've got teenagers hanging in the parks doing hacky sack and smoking pot. You've got lovers nibbling on baguettes and each other in the same park. You've got families with young kids running around, laughing and talking and scolding kids. And then you've got someone like me, a stranger on her own in Montreal with a bad attitude about the city, who slowly falls in love with the place because of the way you park. Torontonians don't park the way Montrealers park. Of course, I also fell in love with the bagels and the poutine and the way that you close down streets so that people can salsa dance on them, the way you close blocks of Saint Laurent for mural festivals. Again, there'd be riots in the city of Toronto if that many streets were closed down and cars could move around. I love when you walk into a residential part of the city and there's this little restaurant tucked into the middle of the street. It's like a little gift just for locals. Like a visitor would never find it, although I did, because wonder and wander. So 4 years ago this month, I'd made the decision to move to Montreal. And that's right, you can clap for that. You won, you got me, I'm here. And when friends ask, who are still in Toronto, who definitely thought I would circle back to Toronto after I'd finished my midlife crisis, that's what they thought was going on, which might have been true. They said, why do you live in Montreal? Because most of my work is still in Toronto. I have 2 homes. I have Montreal, my apartment in Montreal, and Via Rail, the train. because I'm back and forth a lot. But what I explain, in addition to all the things I just mentioned, what I love about living in Montreal, for someone who really enjoys traveling and gets a lot from travel, because it feeds my wonder and I love wandering around in different parts of the world, living in Montreal feels like being at home and away at the same time. Because as I wander around, I only understand about 30% of what's going on, or what's being said about, to, and around me, which means my other senses are really heightened. I love that I live in Canada and Quebec, which is different. It feels different. It's still new to me, so it feels very fresh. So it's this beautiful combination of feeling comfortably uncomfortable. And I love that. That really keeps my wonder alive. I remember actually last summer going over to Hochelaga Maisonneuve for the first time. And you know how little kids, when they see something really exciting, they jump up and clap their hands? So when I saw that Hochelaga Maisonneuve sign with the lights around it, I did a little leap and a clap. I was so happy. I'm like, nobody makes signs like that anymore, and they definitely don't exist anywhere outside of Vegas. How delightful is Montreal? So I ended up moving to Montreal 4 years ago. I'm still here, and I love it. About 18 months after the love affair with Montreal began, I got an email from a friend of mine who lives in Switzerland, a university friend of mine named Tricia. And she sent me an email that said, I don't know anybody else with the flexibility or the interest in a request like this, so I'm only asking you, do you want to come to Switzerland and house sit for us for 2 months while we take our kids on a big trip? Does anybody have any questions about what I probably said? Heck yes, is what I said. So a few months later, I packed my bags and I went to Switzerland, a tiny little village in the mountains called Milan, Mountain Valley, about probably 90-minute train ride from Zurich. I was there for 2 months, and I thought initially, what a wonderful opportunity to write. I'll be able to write, get a start on the book I've been thinking about for a long time. It'll just be perfect, the perfect setting. Gaze out on the mountains and write a lot. And I wrote nothing. I read a lot. I did gaze upon the mountains every day for a long time, some days. I was taken in by my friends, community of friends, so I learned a lot about who were all Swiss. So I learned a lot about Swiss culture, Swiss chocolate, Swiss bread, Swiss cheese, all the good Swiss things. And in fact, I did do some writing when I was there. I wrote emails and social media posts about Swiss chocolate, culture, cheese, and bread. It was a wonderfully restorative time. I was still working. I was doing a bit of consulting remotely and doing a bit of coaching as well. And I'd originally planned after Switzerland to go on to France. I had friends living in Bordeaux that had invited me to come and visit them, and then I was going to spend some time with friends in London before coming back to Montreal. But my friend Justine invited me to come to Lisbon, where I'd never been. In fact, I knew nothing about Portugal and Lisbon except where it was in Europe. I didn't even know, I'm not proud to admit this, but I will, because we're all friends, and I had, I'm being vulnerable. I didn't even know that Ramadas, the chicken place, I didn't even know that was Portuguese food, even though I love it. And I love it even more now that I know it's Portuguese food. So I really knew nothing about Portugal. But Justine said, I think you'll really like Lisbon. Why don't you come for a week and then carry on with your plans? I looked up the flight. It was super cheap. I was curious. I went to Lisbon. And keep in mind, again, I had spent 2 snowy, Swissy months in remote mountain village, Switzerland. And I showed up in Lisbon at the beginning of March. And I remember jumping in the cab at the airport, and the weather was kind of like it is today, breezy, sunny, warm. And we drove into the city, and the cab driver turned onto the road that runs along the Tagus River, and the windows were open, and I could smell that briny, saltwater smell. I was like, oh my God. And then we drove up to, has anyone been to Lisbon? Rue Augusta, the big arch that opens out to the Praça do Comércio, I think that's how you say it. Bright yellow buildings surrounding this giant square. I did one of those gasp, clap in the back seat of the car, so excited. And then, of course, there were streets filled with rainbow-colored houses, tiles and tiles and tiles, more pattern and color, cobblestone streets. By the time we turned onto the little street where my Airbnb was, I had already fallen in love with Lisbon, and I hadn't even set foot outside the cab. I had planned to stay for 1 week. I stayed for 6. And I wandered every day. So I would get up in the morning and I would wander up and down the hills. I had the strongest glute muscles of my life living there. Up and down the hills, I read in parks. I actually did start writing while I was there. And I shared pictures of everything, including pastiche de nata. Am I right, people? I'm still angry that I was denied those tarts for 45 years of my life. I fell in love with those babies hard. And I must have posted about 100 pictures of those in the first week or so I was there. And so as I was sharing with everybody and writing and loving Lisbon and still working while I was there, I kept getting this feedback, and it was exactly the same words. I love seeing Lisbon through your eyes. So the first time I read that, I'm like, no, that's interesting. And I went back to eating pastiche de nata. Then, a few days later, I would open up, Facebook or Instagram and see the same feedback. I love seeing Lisbon through your eyes. I'm like, it's kind of weird. And I went back to eating pastiche de natas, obviously. And then one night, I got up in the middle of the night to go pee and checked my Facebook on the way to the bathroom, obviously. And again, I saw, I love seeing Lisbon through your eyes. And I'm like, then researcher brain in the middle of the night turned on, and I'm like, that's a really interesting pattern. A really interesting pattern. And then I walked back to my room, went to bed, but not, of course, before eating the pastiche de nata that was on my bedside table. When I woke up in the morning, that's when the penny dropped for me. I'm like, there's something interesting about the fact that people are connecting with the way I'm seeing Lisbon. And I wonder what would happen if people got together and shared their own lives through their eyes. And that week, I launched a project called My Curious Eyes. And I put it out to my Facebook, Instagram friends, and said, I'm going to run this project for a week. I'm going to send one prompt every day, simple prompt, color, shape, texture, whatever. And you're going to go out into your lives and take a picture of something that connects with that prompt and then share it back with the group in a private Facebook group. And just tell us about the experience of looking for that thing and taking pictures of things related to it. I thought maybe 5 people might sign up, like my 4 sisters and maybe 1 friend. Almost 50 people signed up. So that was exciting and unexpected, and we ran it for we spent a week together. I sent out a single word prompt with a little micro essay every day, and people loved it. They loved that it gave them something to focus on, created some mindfulness. They loved, and they used this language of, it's sparking wonder in the most mundane things. And so the overwhelming response at the end of that first little trial week was, do it again. We just finished season 7 last week. Season 8 is coming up in September. So now I run this project. It's now 2 weeks because they kept begging, longer, more, do it. They're like, do it every month. And I'm like, people, I need to earn a living. It's a free project, and it will remain free because that feels really important from a community perspective. So now we meet this group of now hundreds of people from around the world, Canada, the US, France, Switzerland, Tunisia, Australia, Germany, South Africa, Argentina, all over the world. We meet every quarter for 2 weeks. And we wonder together, and we go out and wander, and we get curious about our lives and what's around us and why what we see matters. And it is for sure one of the best things I've ever done. It's given me a ton. So people are like, why are you doing it for free? And I'm like, because I get probably more from it than the people who join. But what I hear from people is it helps them slow down. It fosters gratitude. People get incredibly deep when they share, because we do, simple prompts like color, shape, etc. But we also do things like joy, Last time I had a prompt around constraint. I do one now every time with self, and I force/invite strongly people to take a picture, take a selfie, to like reclaim the selfie as something that's powerful and positive as opposed to fluffy and vain and whatever. So we get really deep, and this community of people continues to grow, and sometimes it's just about pictures, but more often it's about connection to self and to others. There's an interesting and delicious anonymity and intimacy in this group that really fosters disclosure and listening and people feeling seen and heard in a way that for me was really unexpected for an online project. So yes, it bridges generations. There's all ages in this project. It bridges geography, obviously. It's sparking creativity. People talk about, coming back to hobbies that have been dormant for years, and this project has given them a sense of wonder and interest and curiosity in some of that work again. Some people have actually quit their jobs as a result of, they say, My Curious Eyes, because it made them realize how unsatisfying and unstimulating the work was. I love it when anything I do encourages people to quit their jobs. May you all leave here and quit your jobs. So it is one of the very best things I've ever done. And now we're starting to take My Curious Eyes into organizations. And I'm seeing the same themes emerge again. It's fostering deeper connections amongst team members. It's sparking creativity. It's amplifying curiosity. And what's really powerful for a lot of companies now that have very large distributed teams, it's bringing those teams closer together. And as I'm sure you know from your own experience, when the humans connect as humans, the work gets better because trust emerges more strongly. Creativity is possible because of the trust and the connection in the community. So I'm very proud of that project. I'm so happy that I wondered and wandered into it as a result of being in Lisbon. And I would, of course, encourage all of you to join us in September. So what I want to leave you with, the lessons that I've learned about wonder in the last 5 years are as follows. I think wonder is fostered and supported by both stillness and stimulus. So I don't think I would have fallen in love with Montreal the way that I did and all the stimulus that's here if I hadn't spent 4 sleepy, snowy, moosey, quiet months in the countryside. I don't think Lisbon would have lit my heart and soul on fire and just gave me this creativity and curiosity, wonder explosion if I hadn't landed there after 2 sleepy, snowy Swiss months in a mountain village. So I think for wonder to really thrive in our lives, we need both stillness and stimulus. I think we also need time alone and time together. I think that our wonder is most acute, or we have the ability to feel wonder when we're alone, because we're not distracted by conversations with another person or thinking about what they're thinking about or how they're experiencing an experience or a surprise or something that we encounter. I think we need to sort of steep in wonder alone initially, but then the effect of wonder, the beautiful gifts of wonder, get amplified when we share them with other people. And I see that time and again every single season of My Curious Eyes. People go out individually and get filled with wonder, capture those in images, and then share it with the group. And the whole experience of that prompt every day gets elevated because we're sharing that wonder we've collected on our own. I think wonder can also be supported by a tiny bit of structure. Sometimes, if you give someone a brief, go out and do wonder, get wonder. It's like asking somebody to go out and find and feel joy. It can be kind of overwhelming, especially if our wonder muscles are a little underused. So I think a tiny bit of structure, like something like My Curious Eyes, can act as this gentle, very simple framework to guide us back to wonder, to guide us into tuning into the wonder-filled things in our lives. I also do another volunteer gig called Street Wisdom. I don't know if any of you've heard of Street Wisdom. Charlie and I have been talking about it since we met. It's a great methodology of literally using the urban environment as a workshop or a walk shop. So I do these volunteer sessions. I'll be doing some in Montreal, which you can learn more about on our website, where we spend 3 hours together, and the structure in that project is about taking a question out to the streets and literally collaborating with the streets on that question. So you go out with a sense of wonder and curiosity and say, hey streets, help me figure out what my book is about. Hey streets, help me figure out what's next. You can ask any question, and it's incredible what comes back. So that's another really nice little bit of structure to help guide your wonder, foster your wonder. And then finally, I really think you need to get out and wander. I think wonder is an analog experience. So, of course, you can see cool stuff online, no kidding. Like there's a whole set of rabbit holes you can fall down in the digital landscape. But I really think the most powerful wonder experiences are analog. So I want to invite you to get away from your screens, get outside, especially this time of year, wander around, wonder around. In fact, I'd invite you to take yourself, your curious eyes and your open heart, on a little wonder date at least once a week. And that can literally be 10 minutes. So before we wrap up, I'd like to just try some of those suggestions out together as a group. Is everyone cool with that? It's going to take 5 minutes, yeah? So I invite you to close your eyes, or if you want to just lower your gaze, soften your gaze if you're uncomfortable closing your eyes for any reason. So close your eyes, and I'm going to guide you through this experience. So wonder loves stillness, quiet mind. So take a big deep breath from your belly. Let it out. Oh, it's Friday. Yummy, 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 yummy. One more deep breath. This is a beautiful venue. Yummy, yummy, yummy. One more. Now, in a minute, not yet, I'm going to invite you to open your eyes, not yet, and you're going to take a slow, purposeful look around, not yet, and I want you to pay attention to color, patterns, texture, shape. And I'm going to give you about a minute to do that, not yet. And then you're going to turn to a new stranger friend and talk about what you noticed and how it felt. So in 3, 2, 1, wonder. Okay. Turn to a new stranger friend and share what you saw, what you noticed, and how it felt. And I'll tell you to switch in about 30 seconds. Beautiful. So I'll just recap. She said when she first opened her eyes, she saw the trees and how they were leaning towards the sun and swaying back and forth. I feel like that's every Montrealer everywhere this time of year. You're like, oh my God, the sun is back. Hello, bonjour, soleil. And she also said she noticed the little fairy, we call them fairy lights in English, and how they were kind of glinting under the sun, looked like they were turning off and on. Can I ask you how it felt to notice, because that's a lot of detail you just shared. How did it feel to notice in that way? A bit magical. So good. Excellent. Somebody, one more person. You want to share what you noticed? Yes, go ahead. Nice and loud.
I noticed the first thing, the roof in plastic kind of like waved.
The corrugated, yeah.
And it made me want to play, like it brought me joy. I don't know why, I was just like, it looked like a slide or something nice. And then I noticed the wood there, like just underneath, there's a lot of lines on the wood, and it just made me think of the sea. And it just like, I don't know, it just made me feel very good.
You had a very special experience. So let me recap, because it was amazing. When she first opened her eyes, she noticed the plastic on top of the stage here, the corrugated plastic, the little ridge plastic, which she said made her want to play, feel like playing, which brought her a sense of joy. And then she noticed the wood down here on the front of the stage, is that right? Yep. And with the lines made her think of the sea, and like she wanted to go swimming, which made her very happy. Are you kidding? That was like less than 5 minutes. So this is my point, that with a little bit of structure and some intention around seeking wonder, it makes you feel amazing. If you do it on a regular basis, it will act as fuel for your creative work. Even, in my experience, deepen your relationships, both at work and at home. So in closing, I just want to say that I'm not here to encourage you to blow up your business, run away from home, and try and wonder and wander your way into clarity, creativity, and curiosity. That's not true. I'm totally here to tell you to do all of those things. However, I recognize that not everybody is a single, child-free, vagabond entrepreneur like me. I do think that you can stimulate wonder and support your wonder, nurture your wonder every day, anytime, anywhere, doing some of the things that we just experienced. So I want to thank you for inviting me to come and talk about one of my favorite topics. If you would like, as you're wandering around, a teeny tiny little bit of structure, a little love note from me. I've got these little postcards with some prompts on the back. You can just tuck them in your pocket. I also created a secret Creative Mornings Montreal webpage for y'all. The web address is on here. It's just curiosityglobal.com/MTLCM. And on there are my notes about the lessons I've learned about wonder, how to sustain wonder, how to wander, how to elevate the curiosity in your life. I have obviously all of my recommendations about the best pastiche de nata in the world. Lisbon, Belém, Montreal, bien sûr. And also a recipe for really good pastiche de nata in case you are, like to cook them at home, which I have not attempted, but that's one of my summer projects. And I would also love to have you join us for My Curious Eyes in September. You can sign up on the secret webpage as well. So thank you, merci beaucoup. May you wander and wonder well. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much.